Welcome to Lesson 2. I'm Mr. C. Today's lesson materials are going to be a sheet of letter-sized paper, a graphite pencil, watercolors or watercolor colored pencils, a pencil sharpener, a jar or a cup that you can use for water, some sort of reusable cloth or rag instead of a paper towel, and then one large brush and one small brush suitable enough for watercolors. Now I'd like you to take a moment and observe this beautiful painting by Claude Monet. It's called Poplars on the Bank of the River Epte. I'd like you to pause the video for 1 minute and just observe this painting. Look at the colors, look at the shapes, and what can you tell about what the artist is trying to tell you? What do you see in this work of art? What do you notice about the trees? Here's another painting. This one's called Hilltop Farm by Maxfield Parrish. Again, I want to give you about a minute to have a look at this painting, just observe it, and see what you can tell is different about this one compared to the previous one. Pause the video and just have a look at this painting. Now, what is different about these trees? What do you notice about the size of the trees? How are they placed in the painting? One more painting to look at. This is Landscape by Asher B. Durant. Again, just take 1 minute, pause the video, and observe this painting, comparing it to the previous two. What images are in the front or foreground of this work of art? What objects are in the middle ground of this painting? And what did the artist do to make you know that those things are further away? What are the things in the background? Let's start the exercise. First, take your paper and arrange it so that it's in a horizontal orientation, or landscape orientation. Next, I want you to, on one side of the paper or the other, doesn't matter where, draw a large tree, reaching from the top of the paper to the bottom. The only important thing I want you to do is make sure that this tree is in the foreground of the work of art. Think about the trunk of the tree. Consider the roots. How would they extend into the ground? How would it extend up into the branches? Once you've done your drawing of the outline of the trunk, start creating an outline of the area of the leaves and branches. You don't have to worry about detail at this stage. Just put in big basic shapes. For instance, I'm making kind of a big green cloud for my shapes. If you want to make a pine tree or something that's more needle shape or sharper, you can go right ahead. It just needs to be in the foreground. Now I'm taking the side of my pencil and sort of scrubbing in little circles on the paper. I'm putting in big gobs of color. All I'm trying to do at this stage is fill in the outline that I sketched a moment before. I'm not worried about detail at this stage either. Just keep filling in the area of the tree that you feel would be in shadow. Think about where the light's coming from. Remember, it's a tree. We're going to be outside. Is it going to be a sunny day? A cloudy day? How intense do you want your colors? The tree's going to be in the foreground, so it's going to be pretty intense as far as color goes. Try and use as much color as you can. Now, not every area of your tree is going to be filled with color. Trees often have little spaces in between the branches. but they still have shadows around those little spaces as well. So try and fill in even those areas with a bit of green, or orange, or bluish green, whatever color your tree happens to be. Here's where you can start using combinations of colors. For example, you can use black or brown to establish shadows along the trunk and branches of your tree. Don't be afraid to change things or make decisions as you draw. Here I'm drawing a little bit more of the trunk going up into the body of the leaves themselves. It felt a little bit skimpy before. As long as you stick to the main plan and just keep drawing your tree, any changes you make to it are going to be a positive one. Now I'm combining dark blue in order to establish shadows along the tree leaves. Am I drawing individual leaves now? Nope. I'm still scrubbing in my little circles, trying to fill in areas that fit the outline of this tree, of where I wanted the shadow of the leaves to fall. Now, once you start feeling pretty good about the main tree in the foreground, I want you to concentrate on the other side of the paper. I want you to think about putting in a tree there in the midground. In order to figure out where the midground is, though, first you need to figure out where the horizon is. You may be asking yourself, what's a horizon? It's very simple. It's where the sky and the ground meet, way, way off in the distance. Again, start by outlining the very basic shape of what you want your tree to look like. But because it's in the midground, it's not going to have a whole lot of detail, at least not nearly as much as the tree that's in the foreground. Use the same basic recipe that you used for the tree in the foreground. Start by creating outlines, and then kind of use the side of your pencil to scribble in the very basic colors that fill in those shapes. Once you start feeling confident enough to put in some layer of shadow on that tree in the midground, use the same basic combination of colors that you use for the tree in the foreground. Problem is, you're not going to have nearly as much room, so there's not going to be as much detail as the tree in the foreground. Here I'm using green to establish a feeling of shadow. You can do the exact same thing under the tree in the midground, but again, you're not going to have nearly as much room. Jumping back into the midground here, just finishing up filling in that large area. I'm trying to leave some of the white of the paper behind again to establish where the light is hitting the tree, so it doesn't have to be completely filled in with color. And now I'm going to put in our very last little tree. I want you to do the same. Find a place in the middle of the picture where you can put a tree in the background. Think about how texture and detail have slowly been diminishing the further away we get from the foreground. Is it meaningful to leave a lot of detail in things that are so far away? I'm putting just a little bit of green down onto the lawn underneath the trees here, and just a little bit of blue up into the sky, especially starting up in the corners. I want the corners just to be a little bit darker than the rest of the sky. Now, once you've got your sky and your ground laid in, just grab your smallest brush, your cup, fill it with some nice clear water, and just start kind of blending them down together with the cool water from your cup. Just dip it in there, and you'll see that putting a lot of detail in with your watercolor pencils doesn't really translate all that well when you start blending them together. But the colors you can get once you add a little bit of water are so much more vibrant because they fill in all the gaps in the texture of the paper that the pencil may have skipped over. Blend it together a little bit. Don't be afraid about getting a little bit messy. This is a really, really fun way of experimenting with watercolor. Just look for ways that you can fill in the shapes that you've outlined with your watercolor pencil. Get into the shadows, find ways to really explore and define the shapes of the trees that you've put into the foreground, the midground, the background. It's okay if you want to get back in there once you've started adding a bit of water to your paper. But just know that when you start adding water to your paper, it does make it a little bit more delicate and it might tear. So if you want to get darker colors or more intense colors, you might need to be a little bit more gentle, a little bit more delicate with the paper. There I am with the bigger brush. The bigger brush is really good for sort of unifying everything in your painting. You can sort of see that it's a little bit harder for things to blend. That's totally fine. That's because the pigments in the strokes that you've created with your watercolor pencils have done a really good job, but they've expended most of the color into the paper that they already have. So if you wanted to go through in another layer, you could. I'm going to stop at this point because I feel like this looks pretty good. You can have your areas of shadow, you have your areas of intense color and light. Just remember that once you get to this stage, you'll need to grab a pencil and sign your name at the bottom. So, what ideas did you learn today? Thank you very much for watching.